Today. So we were doing chapter number 2 of economics, where we were talking about the sectors of the Indian economy. We had talked about the different sectors on the basis of their production, the primary, secondary, and the tertiary sector. We had talked about the schemes like Narega, which help the problem of disguised unemployment or underemployment, which is there in the agriculture sector, and we are able to take care of those problems. And we also talked about the various schemes or the various policies which the government can take to recover the people who are in unemployment situation so that they can get over that. I'm going to log the meeting now. Let's just wait for a minute more. I'm going to lock it up. Attendance and charges to take a screenshot of these participant list, please. Because today is just 72. So today we'll be talking in detail about the two other types of sectors on the basis of their ownership and on the basis of their working condition. These are the two things that we are going to talk about now. Apurva, you have a doubt? Apurva, any query? I saw your hand going up. All right. So given this scenario, we have to think how we can differentiate the situations. Now, what we have to understand over here is that there are two situations which is given to you. One story pertains to Kanta, another one to Kamal. Now, Kanta over here, just by looking at the picture also, you can understand that she is belonging to a kind of a job where she is doing the administrative job, sitting on her desk, she's taking care of that, and she's probably working in an office, right? So where she has to go every day, the specific infrastructure is available to her. When she is working under the government or under the, say, the private sector also, you get a particular salary every month. Your dates are fixed, your timing of coming to the work and going away from the work, that's also fixed to you. Salaries are regular, and you get more facilities. Like if you take a leave, say you are not well for a certain period of time, you can apply for a holiday, right? And that's a paid holiday for you because you're getting a medical leave in that scenario, right? So your salary does not get cut if you are applying for a medical leave. uh, about the other rules, what happens that the government lays down some provident fund rules also. That is, a part of the salary is being cut when and that's been given to them after a certain period of time. It culminates and the government gives you that as a retirement benefit. Okay, so you pay a certain portion and the organization also pays a certain portions, just equivalent to what you give as a provident fund. The company also gives you the same amount, so it is divided between the employer and the employee, and then that culminates, you get an interest on it, and then you can get the amount once you are retiring from the service, right? So these are the options that you get when you're working in a sector where you have specified time duration, the working condition is all good to you, right? You're getting allowances, you get a paid holiday. So all these things are mentioned to you before you join this work, right? That's called a job description. So whenever you're joining a corporate sector or even a government sector, you have a job description given to you that these are the things that you have to do once you join the job. On the other hand, just compare the situation of Kamal over here. He is working in a neighborhood shop over here. The neighborhood shop probably opens at around 7:30. He has to take the load of the transportation, and he has to maintain the stocks in his shop, arrange them properly, and then he keep working till 8 o'clock, right? So this is the way he is working almost the entire time. The Like, he does not have a 8-hour duty, but lot more than that. He will have no allowances, he will have wages and not salary. So there are two different terms that I'm talking about. Kanta was getting a salary which was mentioned to her, and it was on a regular basis. But Kamal here, when he's working in a shop like this, he's going to get wages, something like daily wages, right? So depending upon the days he's working, he's paid accordingly. What happens if the maid is not coming to your house for a few days? she is not well and she is not able to turn up. There are people who do not pay such kind of labor, right? They say that when you are not coming to the for the work, then I'm not going to pay you. As simple as that. So these are the people who get more discriminated because they are not getting any paid holiday, right? Even if it's Independence Day or Republic Day, that doesn't matter. You need the maids to be coming to your home, or you want the shops like these to be open near your house. So these workers, they have to come to the job, even there's no specified days which is holiday for them. So there is no formal letter which tells them this is your job description, nothing like that. They can be asked to leave at any point of time. Imagine you are shifting your house from one part of the city to another. So you will just say that the next month onwards, you will tell your maid that please don't come up because I'm going to shift my house from here. So then she loses her job and she has to keep searching for another one, right? Unless she gets a substitute of yours, she won't be able to get her earning. So these are the two cases where we are categorizing the sectors on the basis of how they are organizing the production, right? Or how the people are engaged in the production. So this is how we categorize the sectors into organized and unorganized. Kanta is working in an organized sector, whereas Kamal, we can say that he is working in an unorganized sector. In both the situation, there are government rules. Now, if you read the newspapers, you will see that the labor laws nowadays, they have been reduced or they have been liberated. So we have something called the labor laws, which the government maintains. Okay, that is the law which all the people who are employing these people as their employees, they have to follow some rules and regulations, right? So the government has liberated those rules because now we cannot have the same kind of working condition. We cannot have 5 days working for people. We are trying to come up with newer ways of how newer working hours also, right? And we cannot cut the salary. So the government is working towards having a new set of rules. So these rules apply to both the formal sector, or I say the organized sector, and the unorganized sector. But they are followed only in the organized sector. In the unorganized sector, there is no one to strictly look after that whether they are following those rules or not. So the government is actually, they have no say over here in the unorganized sector, right? But they have full control to manage the working condition in the organized sectors. For example, in the sector where Kanta is working. So if I give you the example of, say, a doctor working in AIIMS, how would you categorize? Organized or unorganized? Any answers, anyone? Arjun, can I?
Organized.
Okay. So please, great. So organized. So you will have to mention the reason. Okay. If I'm giving you a 3 marker, you should be knowing that just mentioning organized is not going to fetch you marks. So 1 marks for mentioning that he's going to be working in the organized sector, and at least 2 reasons should be given. So there are some bases on the which you can categorize these 2 sectors, like whether they are registered by the government or not. In the organized sector, yes, they are registered. In the unorganized sector, they are not registered over here, right? Terms of employment, regular. So when a person is hired in the organized sector, he gets a regular employment, whereas in the unorganized sector, they get a irregular employment. They can be asked to leave the job at any point of time. So whenever you're giving difference also, please mention the reason also behind it. Put in the full sentence for the explanation. Labor laws. In organized sectors, we have labor laws which are enacted, and it is being followed also over there. Okay, we have something called the Minimum Wage Act, where it is mentioned by the government that you have to give at least this much money as the wage to the laborers that you are hiring, or the employees who are there in your company. Below this, you cannot go. Otherwise, you will be punishable under the law, that the company has to face the legal issues. So this is a minimum wage. So the government sets this minimum wage according to which that, at least the person is able to fulfill his basic necessities of life. So that is how they are going to prevent discrimination happening in the these sectors. On the other hand, if you look at the unorganized sector, they have laws. The government laws are applicable to them, but they are not governed over here, right? They do not follow them, and the government cannot take care of this. Hannah, you have a doubt?
Ma'am, like in the first point, whether it is on the basis of whether it is registered by the government or not, we see that the organized sector is registered by the government.
Right.
So registering here means that the particular company or a place where a person is working is has been registered to the government. Like it can be private sector also, not the private
Absolutely.
companies or the
Absolutely.
MNCs.
Because you have to pay a tax also. The organizations also have to pay tax. So if they have to pay a tax, they have to be under the government scanner, right? Every one of us who are working in the organized sector, the government can see us, how much money we are earning, how much tax we are paying. All these comes into the loop, right? And that's how the laws are also being enforced over here. So we have to, whenever we are forming a company in higher classes, you'll get to know that while forming a company, there are specific papers work that has to be done initially. Even it's an NGO, if you are starting. Now there's a very good example by Sanskriti school students, and specifically of class 10th and 11th. They've come together, they've formed an NGO. I just read about it recently, about how they are collaborating money to provide assistance in this COVID times, and they've got recognition from various TV channels, CNBC and all. So to form any kind of organization like this, you have to do a lot of paperwork first, because you have to be under the government rules and regulations, right? However, if you want to, agar tumhe chai wala banna hai, like Modi ji's previous agendas, so if you have something like that in your mind, then you do not need to have any kind of rules and regulations being followed. You can, any day you can just start your tea stall on the pavement, right? However, when you are in starting such kind of jobs in India, you have to make sure that there are police to be vigilant and take money from you for starting such kind of business also. So that was just on a lighter note to just explain you how organized and unorganized sectors are working, right? Hannah, your doubt is clear, I hope?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So this is how you have to pen down that if I give you any kind of a situation, you have to identify whether the person is working in the organized or the unorganized sector, and there are more points to it. I just mentioned these few 3 pointers. It can be a 5 pointer also that I've just explained you, and you can give the examples also. Like schools, hospitals, they will be organized, because once you have to start a school or a hospital, there are various regulations, various paperwork that you have to do, get registered under the government, and then you can start the business. Whereas if it's any small job, small business, casual laborers, they do not come under the organized sector, they will come under the unorganized sector. But when we talk of this unorganized sector, the problem here is that they have to face a lot of problems over here. When we talk of the labor laws, the laws are there in the unorganized sector, but they are not being followed, and the government cannot intervene because they do not know how many tea stalls are there in Delhi, or who is not following the labor law, right? If they are employing child labor, it's very difficult to identify in which dhaba or in which tea stall the child labor is being utilized over there, right? Or in the carpet making manufacturing sector, sometimes they have the backdoor entries. The children might be working in their own homes. So that becomes a very crucial thing, that the labor laws are not over here, the labor are not protected. You can see how in today's time the migrant laborers are trying to come back to their own rural areas, because they cannot afford the living in metropolitan cities like Delhi or Mumbai, because they are daily wage laborers. So they are getting low salaries in such kind of jobs, sometimes even unfair wages. They are not following that minimum wage act over here, so they get less paid over here in these sectors, and there's no way that they can go against the system, right? There is a large number of people who are in this unorganized sector. So even if you say that you don't want to work at this unfair wage, that's not going to make a difference to me as an employer. I'll say, okay, aaj kanta behan gayi, I'll call the other auntie for doing my household work, right? So this is how the demand and supply is in the market, and even if you're getting the unfair wage, it becomes difficult to tackle it in this kind of a sector. There are cases of exploitation, and majorly from those vulnerable segment, where like you have the landless agricultural laborers, the small and marginalized farmers. You have read in your class 9th chapter number 1 how they are being exploited. The Dalits are being exploited. So the social caste also plays an important role in this unorganized sector. So they are getting, they are facing these problems where they have to struggle to meet their both end meet their both ends means that they are not getting adequate salary, they are not getting proper working condition. If you go to cracker making industries, you will see that they are not following. Initially it was being, studied that they were not following the rules and regulations of how protection should be taken by these workers. They do not have any job security. They'll have to leave the job whenever the employer is asking them to leave, and they don't have any benefits. Like, they have no paid holidays. If you are not well for a day and you don't come to work, you're not getting your salary. So that's probably not a great thing when you're working in the unorganized sector. So the government here needs to play a very important role. The government is trying to take care of the problems of the unorganized sector, and rather than the government, we also have some NGOs who deal with these problems. So the question comes at how we can protect the workers in the unorganized sector. So when we have the small scale industries, so in the urban areas, you can see that you can have better marketing techniques. We can give them raw materials, so the government can give them the raw materials so that they can start their production centers. In the rural areas, we can help the laborers who do not have much money to buy the inputs. They are taking loans from the money lenders. The government can give them the facility of giving them the seeds so that they can start their production, or give them some credit facility. So these are the ways in which the government can intervene in the unorganized sector functioning and give them some kind of benefits over here. And we also talked about how the Dalits or the social castes can also be a segment where there can be protection needed. They might be vulnerable to such kind of exploitation. So you will need to protect them from social discrimination. Like in rural areas, it's very difficult to actually abolish untouchability yet. And that's the reality of India. However, we say that untouchability is a punishable offense. So we need to enforce that very strictly in our country and make sure that, that's not being practiced even in our work areas. And we require their economic development. And when I talk of economic development, that means they should be having more monetary power in their hand. And that is reflected in government's agenda of having the reservation policy, which is very debatable, no doubt. But the idea of when it was started was to give economic development for the scheduled caste, the scheduled tribes. However, debatable it is, because it's been a long time that we have given such reservations to them. And there are people who feel that there is a time limit to which you can give such reservations. So we are expecting that now they have a lot of jobs in their hands, specifically the government jobs. So now they must be better off and they can take care of their families and pass on this through the generation. So that is one debatable issue. But however, such kind of policies have been appreciated so that we can protect the unorganized sector. So we talked about on the basis of the production activity, how we are organizing the production. So we have the two sectors, organized and the unorganized. Now we'll look forward to another type of categorization. So let me just recall, the first categorization that we did was on the basis of production, primary, secondary, tertiary. The second was on the basis of how the production is taking place, how organized the business is. That is categorized into the organized sector and the unorganized sector. And thirdly, if you just look over here, I have an example of HDFC Bank. Now, who do you think is owning the HDFC Bank? The government or the private official? Can I have Akriti Saini to answer my question? Akriti, you've been unmuted. Please give me the answer. Akriti, in which?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Akriti, we weren't
Ma'am, can you repeat the question?
You are not paying attention.
Your voice
okay. So HDFC
No,
Bank.
ma'am, your voice is lagging.
All right. So HDFC Bank will be owned by the government, or is it owned by the private individuals?
I think government.
Very good. Can I have Karthik Singh to answer my question? Same question. Kartik, answer please quickly.
Ma'am, I think private.
Okay. Are you sure about that, or are you just thinking about it?
Ma'am, I think private.
Okay. So you think that it's owned by the
private.
private individuals. Okay. Rhythm, can I have you to answer whether LIC is owned by government or by private?
Ma'am, HDFC is owned by private and LIC is owned by government.
Exactly. Okay. Rhythm, you can mute yourself now. Let me have Aditya Dua. Aditya, please unmute yourself. I'm not able. Acha, now you're
Yes,
unmute.
ma'am.
So now you tell me. You read the picture over here about Air India. Air India initially, was it under the government or was it under the private?
I'm under the government.
Right. And now what is it happening? Is it still under the government? Any idea about that?
No.
You don't read newspapers. How do you know? Right. Very nice. You are an ideal economic student then. So Air India, if we consider, it was initially the part of government sector, but it has incurred a lot of losses, and now you can see in this article also that the government has been selling off the shares of Air India to the private individuals. When we talk of KV, Indian Railways, these are all owned by the government, right? So here all the asset, like the train over here or the school building, these are the assets, like the infrastructure. Who is providing that? The provision is done by the government, right? On the other hand, if I compare a bank like HDFC, L&T company who makes your roads, right? So they are into the construction business. You talk of Tata. These are the companies which are not owned by the government. It is rather owned by the private individuals. Ritvik, 10A, you have any doubt?
Ma'am,
Yes, ma'am. As you gave the example of airline, Air India, ma'am, the same is happening with the Indian Railways also.
Yes.
So is the reason same for it?
Yes. No, the reason is not that Indian Railways is into losses. That's not the criteria. But we want private individuals to come into these sectors so that, because we know that the privates are more efficient in providing this. We want that the government should provide those basic necessities rather than providing such kind of services, which the privates can do it very nicely. Okay. So that's another concept of it, but well taken off. Ananya, you have a doubt?
ma'am, I wanted to know the syllabus.
Ananya, good morning
Ma'am,
and good night to you. I'm teaching over here, Ananya. How can you ask me this? And I've told it in the first
Ma'am,
half of
good
the class
afternoon.
only. Anyway, so moving on, that we are talking about how the ownership tends to differ between the private and the public sector. So that is how we categorize the two sectors on the basis of their ownership. Some sectors where you have the ownership of the assets and the delivery being done by the government, they'll be called as the public sector. Whereas if you have the provision being given by the individuals on their own without any government intervention, those are the private sector, right? So if we have to differentiate them, we can have some basis. First, we can differentiate on the basis of the definition, that we say that they are managed and controlled by government, then we categorize it as the public sector. If they are managed and controlled by individual or the group of individuals, like you say the Reliance company, there are so many brothers over there and they also have more stakeholders who are the owner of that company. So then you will say those are the group of individuals who come together and they form that company. They are also being categorized under the private sector. The government, when it provides the goods and services, its aim is only for social welfare, right? It will tend to maximize social welfare, that everybody should be well off, right? For example, if you have the migrant laborers, if you just see their condition, are they traveling by flight or are they traveling by train? Now the government is saying that within Tuesday we'll start off with the functioning of the railway lines also. So we are going to open the railways. So you say that we are not interested in managing the railways because we want more and more people to avail this cheap facility. If we provide this facility to private, they might be charging more money, and the general people in our country, they might not be able to afford those. So the basic idea of public sector when they are providing any good is that it should be maximizing the welfare of everyone, whereas private sector has nothing to do with the social welfare. They are not socialist over here. They are capitalists, as I call them, who are willing to earn more and more profit. That is their basic agenda, as simple as that. They do have companies nowadays, they have the CSR, if you read about it, that they are taking care of the community and all. But that is how the government has framed some policies for them, that they have to take care of the community service also. So some companies have this policy that out of their profits, they are doing some social welfare purpose. But the main idea, agenda remains of that of profit earning. What kind of facilities can you see the public sector being providing? You can see the KV's example, how education is being provided, healthcare, you see the government hospitals, you see food security being taken care of by the government. So many policies are being formulated where we have the MSP. Who's managing all that? The buffer stock. The government does that because they feel that this is for everyone's welfare, not a specific group of people, but for the entire nation. This is very important. And if they leave it to the private sector, then the private sector might be charging them a higher price because they only want profit. So in that scenario, we cannot expect that everybody will be able to purchase those goods when the private sector is providing them. So the private sector will produce those goods where they can earn profit. Luxury goods, providing the consumer goods. We have Walmart. If they come to India, the debate was that if company like Walmart, they come to India, nobody will be purchasing the goods from the local the shops, right? They will go unemployed in this kind of scenario. The debate was that in our times when we had to think about whether to allow Walmart to come to India or not. So these are the things that we need to think about when we are taking such decisions. And when you put up your doubt today that how the railways are now being a part of private sector, it's only portions of it being given to the private sector. For example, the cleanliness of the railway station has been allocated to private sectors. Okay, private individuals are given the authority to take care of the cleanliness. So you can see that betterment is coming because the government does not want to keep everything in their hand. They feel it's better to manage the economy rather than becoming a manufacturer of these kind of facilities, because they can do better in managing the things. And we have examples that of railways, the Indian Post, Telegraph coming under the public sector, whereas you can give the examples of Reliance, Tisco. All these could be the private sector examples, or you can quote your own examples also. We have a lot of it. Now, a very important topic which can come as a 3 marker or a 5 marker in your examination. This is a board, one of the important topic is that why do we have this public sector? If we say that our private sector is doing so good and the government is giving out the stakes to the private sector so much, even in the services like Air India, and we are talking about our railways also nowadays, then how come this public sector is important for us? The answer lies in the fact that there are various things which have a huge capital requirement. That is, we need a lot of money to build these kind of infrastructural facilities. And for that, we need the government to spend. Because that kind of money, probably, we won't have the private sector to invest in. And even if they invest, they would want more and more profit out of it. So we have the roadways, the railways, these basic transportation facilities are being provided by the government. You can see your DTC buses also. So we also keep into mind that there's a lot of capital required to build up such facilities. So bridges, railways, the harbors, how we are generating electricity, all these will come under the public sector because of the huge capital requirement to set up the production. Number 2 reason, how the money is to be collected. To provide these goods and services, you need a lot of money, right? And the government gets the money through the people when they are paying taxes. So they are utilizing that in providing the goods which is for the social welfare of all. So in that case, they are utilizing the money in a very efficient way, which the private may not be able to do that. They cannot take a tax from us. They are not authorized to take any tax from individuals. Thirdly, if you see the example of electricity being provided in India, if the private firms are providing electricity, can you expect them to provide you at a very minimal cost? In Delhi nowadays, we are having the subsidies in electricity. There might be some houses where people are not paying bills because the Delhi government has made it, till a certain limit, it's subsidized. It's completely 100% subsidized. So if you're falling in that limit, if your electricity bills comes in that limit of, I think, 700 in the urban areas, then we don't have to pay that bill at all. So there were so many people who were benefiting from this. And even after that limit, which is set by the Delhi government currently, if you are utilizing more electricity, then also it is at a very nominal price. But since the government is providing this service, it is easy for them to charge this low price, because their motive is not for profit maximization, but for social welfare, right? So this is one reason because of which we have the public sector being providing the goods. Again, you have the example of food security over here, where the government has to intervene because they have to provide the food to all the caste, all the regions at a subsidized price. Who is going to do that? Again, the government, to make sure everybody is able to live their basic 2 square meals of a day. Then you have the examples of states like Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, which have very high infant mortality rate, high malnutrition level among children. How are they going to deal with that? No private sector is going to come to help them out in that scenario. Nobody is scared about the social welfare in the private sector. So then you require the government to intervene and take care of the regional development. So we need to have a balanced regional development in the way that the regions which are very poor in the social and economic development, we have to give them some kind of benefits, some policies have to be framed so that they are able to tackle the situation and come up to the level where probably Delhi is, right? So providing the basic necessities in the remote areas will be the responsibility of the public sector. So these are a few reasons because of which we still need the public sector. So we cannot say that the role of public sector is diminishing day by day, but we do need them in some key areas so that there is social welfare happening. So if I leave you with the summary, you'll have to go through on their own that all we studied in this chapter was that the sectors of the economy on the basis of the production, how the trends were, primary, secondary, tertiary, the trends are very important over here, how the tertiary sector is playing a role in production, but a very diminishing role in their employment. Then we talked about on the basis of the organization, we have the organized and the unorganized sector, and what are the problems of the unorganized sector that needs to be taken care of. Then lastly, we talked about how the ownership affects the division, that we have two divisions over here on the basis of the ownership, the public and the private. And then again, the crucial role of the public sector, majorly when we talk of this division. One thing that should be coming to your mind is, why did we study this chapter? Why did we study about so many sectors over here? And that's because we have a large economy and we need to see how much each sector is contributing. So to see which sector is contributing the most or what are the problems in a specific sector, we have divided our Indian economy into these sectors so that it's easy for us to analyze, for the government to analyze the sectors which are doing good and the sectors that need more help, right? So this was the basic agenda of this chapter, and I